So you've chosen to make homemade bread. That's a great choice. Some reasons why are, it's economical, about a quarter of the price of store-bought bread. Second, it's a great way to go through your food storage items like milk, flour, and oil. And last, it smells and tastes so good. So let's get started. I'm going to go over a basic recipe for homemade bread that makes 5 loaves. The recipe starts with warm water, 5 cups. I've just gotten this to a scalding temperature because you don't want it to be too hot for the yeast. I like to use a small measuring cup for my wet ingredients. So that was 5 cups water, then 1 cup of oil, 1 3/4 cups of milk, and I've used powdered milk here. And so the liquid is still a bit warm from that scalding water. Then I add 4 tablespoons of yeast. And I like to buy the big bulk packages of yeast and then keep it in my freezer. It lasts a long time. 2 tablespoons of salt. And a 1/2 cup of sugar. And I'm a busy mom. I don't have time to get too persnickety about the measurements, but the bread still turns out. Now I just stir this up a little bit. And now, I like a big measuring cup for my flour. I do the first half of the flour, which is 8 cups. I typically use white flour. So there's 4 cups. And 4 more cups. And then it's important to stir again at this stage to incorporate the first half of the flour. I love this recipe and this process because it only takes about a 1/2 hour of active time and then another 1.5 hours of passive time to yield these 5 loaves of wonderful bread. So we're almost done here. And in the end, you want soft dough. Soft but not too sticky. I think that will do. Now take off your rings if you have any before you do this next step. Now I usually use wheat flour for the second part. And this can be purchased wheat flour, or if you have a grinder, you can make your own wheat flour from stored wheat. Sometimes you have to add a little more flour to get it to the right consistency. So we'll knead here for a few minutes and see what we need.
So you just mix it with your hands?
I mix it with my hands and I do it right inside the bowl so I don't have any messy counters. The only extra equipment that a person might need is a really big mixing bowl and 5 loaf pans, but everything else most people should have in their kitchens. A lot of times those can be picked up at a thrift store or a garage sale too, so usually pretty economical. Now I like my dough a little stickier than most people like theirs because it's easier to knead and it makes bread really nice and soft. but this might be a bit sticky. So, okay.
All right.
So I ended up having to add another half cup flour or so just to get it to the right consistency, where it's firm enough to pull it away from the sides of the bowl, but still easy to work with. So I'm going to keep doing this for 15 minutes. So goodbye, and I'll see you then. So I've been kneading for 15 minutes. I've kept the dough in the bowl. And you'll notice that the dough has a somewhat stretchy quality to it. It doesn't immediately break when it's pulled. So that's a kind of elastic quality you want the dough to have. Now, we need to set it aside and let it rise. In an average climate, that will take about an hour, but you can speed that process up a little bit. Some people like to put the bowl in the oven, with an off oven, with a pan with hot boiling water next to it, just to add to the warmth and humidity next to the dough. But I usually just put it on the counter and cover it with a small cloth so that it doesn't get crusted on the top. So I'll see you in about an hour. So here we are back again. We have our dough that has doubled in size, and so now we need to preheat the oven. To 325, and then I have already gone ahead and greased the bread pans. I usually use a thin layer of shortening or the spray-on oil. Now we'll shape the loaves. So usually by the time that the oven is all preheated and the loaves are ready to go in, the dough has reached about halfway up in the pans, and that's sufficient for them to go in the oven. They'll bake for 40 minutes, and so in 40 minutes we'll have some delicious homemade bread. Now I've gotten the bread out of the oven after 40 minutes of baking time. It smells so good. So what I do is loosen the bread a little bit from the edges and dump it onto a cooling rack. Let it cool on the cooling racks until it's just barely still warm, and then I put it in a plastic bag, and that seals in the moisture and makes the bread very soft. For the bread that I'm not going to use within the first couple days, I store in the refrigerator or in the freezer, and it keeps very well. I hope you've enjoyed learning to make homemade bread today. And if you want more information about food storage or bread baking, please visit www.yearssupplyin7days.com. Thank you.